Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday, February 19th, North Middlesex Council meeting. Everyone's here. Before we get started, I want to thank all of our snowplow operators who've been working such long hours, keeping the sidewalks and roads clear. And I know it's been a tough and long winter, and I want to pass that information on to our North Middlesex cleaners and the staff, and also to the Middlesex County group as well, because if you look around, they've done a great job here. So I just wanted to pass that on. Call this meeting to order. Disclose your pecuniary interest. Seeing none. If you have any, please forward it to Alan. Minutes of the previous meeting for February the 5th. Any errors, omissions, or business arising? Seeing none. Moved by Councillor Daigle, seconded by Councillor Nerda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Our first item is we have a delegation, and that is for the RVA, the Park Hill Lagoon dredging. If you want to come up here, please, to the witness stand. Good evening. Yeah, if you could use your microphone, just turn your microphone on, please. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amro McDaddy. I'm from RV Anderson, and with me here today back is also John Terrell, the regional manager of our office for RVA. So this past year, we were retained by the municipality to oversee the Park Hill Lagoon dredging operation. And so we started off by preparing a capacity assessment tech memo and looking at what will the municipality gain from this investment. And then following that, we prepared the actual lagoon dredging operations. So I'll introduce a brief summary. So 2 phases to this work. 2024, we completed the South Lagoon, and in 2025, we'll be doing the work in the North Lagoon. For the presentation today, I'm going to start off by giving you a brief background on who RVA is and how we got here, the project, a quick timeline summary on it, the procurement process, how we ended up with the contractor that we got, the lagoon dredging operations, the results, and potential next steps for this work. So RVA, we've been in the business for over 75 years, founded by Rod Anderson, and just the name RVA. We're employee owned and operated, so we're based on an ownership shareholder model at RVA. We base our culture on 5 really core aspects of our vision. It's our people, quality, accountability in the work that we do, sustainability for the solutions that we're providing, and integrity in our approach to work. So we can now go into how we got involved with this project. So we started our work in North Middlesex based on actually a reference from Strathmore-Caradoc. So Jaden Hodgins was looking around for a firm that had done similar work, and Strathmore-Caradoc referred us to Jaden, and that's how we found ourselves here in front of you today. The work started with, again, a capacity assessment of the lagoon. So if the municipality was to invest X amount of millions of dollars, what will they gain out of it? And so we looked back at the historical records. We looked back at where the sludge buildup in the lagoon sat, and we identified the potential for adding 372 new homes following the investment in the lagoon dredging activities. And so once that tech memo was submitted and accepted by the municipality, we moved on to the next phase, which is preparing the work plan for the lagoon dredging activities, tendering it out, and providing tendering assistance and contract administration services. So the 2 lagoon cells, for those of you not familiar, were built in 1978 and have not been cleaned since. So that's over 40 years of buildup, of sludge buildup in the lagoon. And that presented its own challenge when trying to assess the amount of sludge buildup at the bottom of the lagoon. The way the study works is they're in a boat in a lagoon and they're sticking a rod down, and based on how deep the rod is, that's our estimating how thick the lagoon cell is. And you'll find out shortly when we went out there, that sludge was a lot thicker than anticipated. So normally we would have seen about a 10 to 12% thick solids at the bottom of the lagoon. We're experiencing close to 20 just because of the age of the sludge that was out there. The project was awarded to GFL as the lowest bidder. And on the next slide, I've got a breakdown of the three lowest bids. Now, one of the things that we did with this contract is we made it a performance-based contract and not based on a specific style of lagoon dredging operation, so that we do not exclude bidders out there. And we saw that in the three different companies that bid all have three different approaches. So Wessuck typically does a lagoon bot. So they have this bot that goes in the lagoon. GFL uses heavy equipment inside the lagoon. NTEC would drain it and dry the lagoon in geotubes on the bed, and then come and remove the dried solids later. So three different approaches, but again, three different bidders, which provided the municipality with the best value for bid. The numbers you see there, 1.01 and 1.02, that's the work happening in 2024 and 2025 respectively. And then 1.03 is the contingency we carried on this project of $100,000. So GFL was awarded the work. And so over here, we've got a picture of the sludge removal activities that they were doing. So they had the pump and the discharge piping that connected to the trucks, and then a dredger that's going in the lagoon and pushing the sludge towards that pump. The GFL had about 4 trucks, but they kept going around in circles on a day-to-day. So those 4 trucks on, I think the max day they did 80 round trips between discharging the farms, coming back, loading up and going. And so it was an intensive about 15 days of work on site to remove all the sludge. The way that we calculated payment is based on a dry ton. So, and that is to help make sure that we're not just taking water out of the lagoon and paying for water removal, that we're removing actual sludge. So every truck that was sent out, we took a sample of that truck and collected it in a bucket. And at the end of the day, we took a sample of that bucket for testing, and that determined the dry ton weightage for that day. So it's a composite sample. It's to try to find an average of every single one, so that, you know, if one truck had more liquid than the other, one more solid, this would even it out for the day. And we repeated this testing. The testing was done by a third-party lab, so it wasn't done by either the municipality or GFL. So it's independent third-party testing that was carried out on this job. Now, we had a prescribed amount of tonnage to be removed as part of the base scope. We also, in phase 1 or in the 2024 work, approved the use of the full contingency, the full $100,000 contingency that provided an additional 400 tons of dry tons of sludge being removed. The contractor still had commitments beyond that to landowners in the area, so they removed an additional close to 400 dry tons as well to meet their commitments to the farmers, because they wanted to keep the farmers happy. So that last round of removal was not paid for by a municipality, but you know, contractor wanted to maintain their relationships with the farmers there. So one of the things to note, just because it is the most kind of visible aspect of the lagoon, if you were to walk out there today, you would still see some sludge buildup and around the edges of the lagoon. However, there was some rocks around there. We did not want to be sending those rocks in through that pump and damaging the pump. So that's why, you know, if you go out there, the kind of the most visible thing you'll see is still sludge there, but below the water where it matters, we removed as much of the sludge there as possible. So this is kind of a tally of volumes removed on a day-to-day basis and what happened during those 15 days on site. And as you can see, I think we had a peak there on September 11th of 81 round trip trucks. We had days of 60 and 50 and 63 and 70. So there were long days. Our crew and inspectors out there on site were out there for 14, 15 hours a day. So it wasn't a kind of an 8-hour day. It was a very intensive 15 days in terms of the work being performed. The subtotal at the bottom of -402.84 That's just to show the balance that the contractor went beyond what was in the contract. So that 400 additional tons were removed outside of what was in the contract counts and the tender prices. Now, what are the next steps? So in 2025, we're going to be doing the North Cell, and we're working with Aqua and the municipality to come up with a plan for the work in the North Cell. We also replaced the effluent valve. So one of the things that we noticed after draining those lagoons is there are two valves in the effluent chamber, one at a really low elevation and one really high, which limited the amount of water that could be discharged at any one point. The one at the very bottom was too close to the solids that if the operators open it, it'll be a large volume of solids and you would not meet your TSS requirements in the MECP. And so therefore, that one had been shut and not operated. The one at the very top only allowed you to kind of move in a very narrow range at the very top of the lagoon with your seasonal discharge. So we've, as part of this work, installed a valve in the middle to permit more drainage out of the lagoon on a seasonal basis. And a similar step will be followed with the North Cell as well. So we'll be adding that work to the North Cell. So we go back to now the capacity being unlocked. Unfortunately, this wasn't large enough, but based on the average flow in the engineering standards for the municipality of North Middlesex of 225 liters per capita per day and about 3.5 people per unit, we've now estimated that 372 additional homes can be built in Park Hill. So this is 372 homes at 3.5 people per unit. So if you were to build smaller townhouses where it's 1.8, you're allowed to, you can go beyond that. But the calculation is scalable based on the type of development that that's being proposed and what can be done. The 609 yearly average. So we did what we call a 5-year rolling average. And so to try to blend out the peaks that happened over the last few years, we had about 8 years worth of data. And then we took every 5 years and averaged that out. And then, so the average of 609 is the average of that 5-year average. So you have the first 5 years and then consequently every 5 years beyond then. So we'll have a 3-year, 5-year rolling average number. And then we took the 609. So that approach will minimize the skews. So the extreme highs and the extreme lows every year and kind of giving you a flatter curve for your, for estimating the new homes so that we're not, kind of biased because one year you had more flow than another year and that restricts you. So now, where do we go from now? So in order not to find ourselves in the kind of same position 40 years from now, we've recommended that a sludge monitoring program happen every 5 to 10 years. And that's where they go out and they measure the depth of sludge throughout the lagoon, right? With a dredging cycle of every 10 to 15 years, that will lower the capital investment required at that time. So instead of it being this, $2 million investment at one shot, it'll go down to $700,000 every 10 years and, more manageable expenditure. One of the things we were talking about with the municipality early on is creative approaches to unlock additional capacity. And this is one of the things where as engineers, we can go with the tried and true, which is a plant just like you have in Elsa Craig, or we can look at the asset we have and say how can we maximize this asset. And one of the approaches that we've pitched to the municipality, and this will take will require buy-in from the MECP, but it's the introduction of baffling curtains. So the baffling curtains will extend the flow path through the lagoon. Right now, if you think about the regular flow of water, it's going to take the path of least resistance. It's going to go in one end and try to go out the other end as fast as possible. So if you insert the curtains, it'll give it a longer kind of meandering path through it. Now, how does that give you more capacity? It allows you to drain your lagoons 3 times per year instead of 2. And so if you're storing for a less amount of time, you're able to now get more capacity out of the lagoon between those discharge periods. So that is one thing that we've kind of high level talking to Sally about something that they might want to consider as a short-term stopgap for getting additional capacity, pushing your existing asset to its limits and you know, at a relatively low capital investment, you know, for this work. And that's it. I'll open up for any questions.
All right.
that we have.
All right. Thank you very much. Questions? Who wants to start? Councillor Cornelison, go ahead.
Thank you. Interesting presentation. I quite enjoyed that very much.
Thank you.
So I have two questions. I think you addressed it somewhat in your presentation, but I'm assuming that there's a lot of foreign material in this cell as well. How do you prevent that from going onto the farmers' fields?
So the trucks are actually equipped with screening equipment. So it's when they're being pumped in, it's picking up the sludge, it gets screened, and then it goes into the sludge storage tank. So they've got kind of two separate compartments going there. And then what we're measuring is the sludge and water mixture, not what was being pumped in. So they have on the trucks, they're specially designed trucks with that screen to prevent that from happening.
You mentioned that you had to bring in extra material because some of the farmers were expecting it.
Yeah.
So that led me to thinking, do the farmers pay for this stuff?
The farmers will pay for it, but it's not, the cost is a lot lower because, you know, they're paying for the discharge and, you know, and some of their own trips. So I think this is part of why this model of field application works very well. And one of the reasons why GFL was able to price it so competitively is there's some of the cost was borne by the municipality for taking out the field, but some of the cost was borne by the farmers in the field to get it applied there as well.
So is this material just spread on top of the land or is it
It's just
injected?
spread on top of the land, yeah. So if you're ever driving on the highway and that stench hits you, that's what's happening is someone got a field applied sludge on their
Okay.
fields.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. I just want to comment. I don't know who all went to see them doing it, to see that operation happening. But we did go for a tour and honest, we were standing right at the edge of where they were working. And it just smells like swamp or wetlands. That's what it smells like at that time. So it's not as heavy as some of the other things. Other questions? Deputy Mayor Hodgins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you the one that finds the farmers to put this on, or do they approach you?
No, so it's GFL that finds the farmers to put it on. So attached to the tech memo that we submitted to the municipality is a sample of the NASM plans that get prepared by GFL in cooperation with the farmers to spread those on the farmers' fields. So this is all done by GFL.
I think Sam can add to that.
Through your worship, pardon me, appended to the report I submitted is that tech memo. So if you did want to go through that in detail, at the back of that is the NASM reporting that is being referred to.
Another question, is MOE or any part of the ministry supposed to be there on farmers' land to see that this is applied properly or not?
So the testing that we did before removing any of the sludge is what the MECP requires. So we did testing for heavy metal content and what the makeup of the biosolids are. And based on that, there's two tables of requirements that are in the MECP guidelines, and based on those determines which fields can accept which sludge. Now, luckily, the sludge that was coming out of the Park Hill had no heavy metal, or the heavy metal concentrations were lower than the MECP limits, and therefore we would have a variety of fields open for us for a field application.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, just change a bit. There are two lagoons out there.
Yes.
Number one, you've done, I guess, the south one, north one, hopefully this year. I read it, like you said, hopefully a possible dredging cycle every 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
Is that both of them, or is maybe the north one going to go a little bit longer, or is the south one going to take the brunt? Should be done every 15 years.
Based on the buildup right now, there's less solids in the South Lagoon than the North Lagoon, just based on how the flow comes in. So your flow comes into the North Lagoon first and then overflows into the South Lagoon after. And so a lot of the settling, because it is that heavier, is going to happen in the North Lagoon first, right? And so that routine kind of check every 5 years will give you an idea of those buildups as well, right? So that, you know, and again, you can also look at it in terms of smaller areas of the lagoon, you know, done more frequently will help reduce that capital investment so that the first third of the lagoon is always going to have more in it than the last 2/3.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Keel?
Thank you, Mayor Rob. You'd mentioned that you were going to, or another option is to put curtains
Yes.
in there, dampening curtains or whatever. Do they sit above the water level at all, or are they all below the water level?
They're just like a kind of a wall that it does sit above the water level, and they've got an opening inside them to allow the water to flow through, right? And so you've created a longer path for the water to flow. So now, so you've gained two advantages. First is your the majority of your settling is happening in that first third where that first curtain sits, and so lagoon dredging operations become confined more towards that first third compared to the last 2/3 of the lagoon. And then on the back end of it, your solids content a lot lower because the flow path is a lot longer. You're able to settle a lot more solids out of it, which means your effluent is now cleaner when on the back end, and so you're able to discharge more of it into the lagoon, into the stream. Sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the principle of that to have the most available sunlight to it and the movement of the like the little waves or the that the wind creates? Isn't that part of its dissolution process?
So it's still, so it's just a kind of a vertical like geotextile wall. It won't prevent that from it won't stop that from happening. So it'll still keep on.
Okay. Other questions? So I'm a year old, I'm a year older now. No, I just have, you talked about the curtains.
Yeah.
Have you been working, like, have you been working with Aqua on that and our staff as well?
No,
Starting to discuss that?
This is one of the things where when we were talking with at the time Jaden and the municipality, and you know you know, RVA, what can be done
Okay.
to, you know, give it, you know, get creative and let's think outside the box here. You know,
I love that thinking, like,
Yeah.
and I'm sure if everybody gets working together, there's something.
That's
So-
and that's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. My other question is for Brandon and Sam, and I think you did a lot of work at that south cell to get that ready to be done, and it looks great. Do you have more to do for the north cell now as well?
Through your worship. So yeah, Public Works has more work to do there for the trucks to turn around so they have easier access to get to that second cell, north cell.
Okay, well, it's really cleaned that whole grounds up. It looks good, but I just want to know if you had more to do that. But if there's no other questions, thank you very much for your time, sir,
Thank you very much.
and appreciate it.
Thank you.
I need a motion to receive and regarding the lagoon dredging, and the council approve a contract extension with GFL. Sorry.
Your worship, before we make that resolution, I believe Sam wanted to make a presentation.
Sorry, Sam. Go ahead.
Through your worship, in addition to the presentation that, excuse me, that was just put forward, the motions that are appended to my report that support the presentation that was put forward tonight. With the work that was done, the contingency on the project was $100,000. It was expended entirely with all the extra desludging that was done. So the two motions that I've added to the presentation as part of my report are that my report is received DIO 08 of 2025, and that we extend the project by another $100,000 to add the extra contingency for the other cell in case we have similar results like we did with the other one, where we're able to desludge way more than we thought we would. And in order to do that, we need contingency to pay for that. So to append it to the presentation are those two motions in front of council tonight.
Okay. Any questions for Sam on this? Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, just to remind council that we did receive some money from half two that will help offset some of these costs, so that the amount of that is somewhat undetermined at this point, because there's some work we have to do with the initiatives that we agreed to as well, but the majority then could be utilized for this project.
All right, go ahead, Sam.
Through your worship, I'll just add that last year council also approved a policy that Jaden put through that worked to recover costs, that the desludging costs. So in addition to what Carolyn noted, we will be obviously following that policy and recovering monies to cover the cost of desludging where we can.
Perfect, thank you. All right, we have a recommendation. Are you making the motion? Okay. Yes, all right. Moved by Counselor Irwin, seconded, Counselor Keough. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Apologize, Sam, for missing that. Our next is 4.2 Emergency Management Group, Community Risk Assessment and Fire Master Plan. And we'll invite our chiefs up here and who do we have online?
Your worship,
Yeah.
I'd just like to note that one of the presenters is not available tonight. So Rick Monkman will be presenting both the community risk assessment and the fire master plan on behalf of the emergency management group.
Okay, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate the opportunity for completing the community risk assessment and fire master plan for North Middlesex. It was quite an in-depth project, and we enjoyed it very much working with your staff and bringing forward these documents to you tonight. So if we could have the next slide, please. So the community risk assessment, I'm going to speak to that first, is brought forward by the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office in 2019 under old regulation 37818. And what it was beginning July 1st of 2019, every municipality had to have a community risk assessment completed by July 1st of 2024. Therefore, North Middlesex has completed theirs and they are compliant with the Ontario regulation. It has to be reviewed annually by the fire chief and a new one developed every 5 years is the requirement of under the regulation. Next slide, please. The regulation was brought forward, I believe, it's not been made official comment, is a lot of the municipalities are having trouble attaining firefighters during the daytime to respond to calls. So the fire marshal's office, I believe, thought the best way to combat that or look after this challenge presented to municipalities was prevent fires from occurring to begin with. So they're started promoting the 3 lines of defense stronger than what they had been in the past. The first line being public education. The second line of defense is fire code enforcement and inspections. The third line is our normal emergency response. And then we at the Emergency Management Group believe there's a 4th line, and that's emergency management. And that's because emergency management and the fire service have very close ties together when an emergency happens in any community. Next slide, please. So the community risk assessment has 9 different profiles. I'm not going to read them all off. As you can see, there's different ones that we look at. We examine every part of it, every one of them based on your statistics and your present situation within North Middlesex. And then we assign a risk level to what risks we did identify. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is a risk? A risk is a probability and possibility of an event occurring, and that will have an adverse effect on the community. Then what's the probability and the consequences of it? Well, there's a fire and life safety risks, and then you have to prioritize these risks based on the fire matrix, which is part of the program that you have to use. And then once you've assigned a level of risk, we have to come up and develop a mitigation strategy as to what we would do to mitigate the strategy and reduce the risk to the community. Next slide, please. So how do we assign a level of risk? So we can avoid the risk, and that's by implementing programs and initiatives to prevent fires and events from occurring. We can mitigate the risk by having programs and initiatives already implemented to reduce the probability and consequence. We can accept the risk where we do no programs at all will be implemented, or we can transfer the risk to another fire department, such as a technical rescue. If you don't have the means or the expertise within the department, you could bring in an outside fire department to look after and mitigating the technical rescue itself. So that is transferring the risk. So once the fire department has determined the preferred treatment option, for each risk, they'll then implement different programs and initiatives to reduce that risk, if not eliminate it. Next one, please. So why do we want to do a CRA to begin with? It'll enable the community to identify and evaluate potential risks, vulnerabilities, and possible disasters such as a tornado, as I mentioned here. technological risks such as technical rescues, hazmat incidents, public health such as the pandemic we went through. And then there's demographic risks as aging population or a younger demographic moving into the community. What requirements would be needed for public education demands? Then you design the strategies to mitigate each threat. And then upon completion, your findings, the CRA will aid in developing the fire master plan. We find that once this community risk assessment is completed, the risks that are identified help drive the requirements of the fire master plan, and that they've identified risks and shortcomings within the fire department. And then we develop a mitigation strategy to reduce this risk for the community. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? So the fire master plan has been developed, which we'll be discussing momentarily. But now that the risks in the community have been identified, how we address them. With declining budgets among fire departments and local governments, is going to have to look at more focused allocation of resources, shared services with another fire department, for example. Community demographics are rapidly changing, such as an older demographic or a younger demographic. How's that going to affect public education and inspections requirements? High-risk residents tend to remain underserved, such as the vulnerable occupancies, again, our seniors demographic. And then population intensification, such as multiplex units, where you've got high rises or low rises, where you've got a higher density of population, is a higher risk to the fire department if a fire occurs. Next slide, please. Now, we may avoid the potential ramifications by ignoring it or not addressing it, and that's not always the best thing. Just because it's never happened before doesn't mean it's not going to happen, so that's where preparation is priority. The CRA Community Risk Reduction Plan itself will better define what the fire department needs to do and focus on going forward in the coming years. And then it's recommended that the fire department access the OFM's Fire Risk Reduction Dashboard, which is available online, which will help them in categorizing risks going forward in the future and how to mitigate them as well. Next slide, please. So as I said, the community risk assessment helps drive the fire master plan. So now we'll speak to the fire master plan. Next slide, please. So when we looked at the fire master plan, there's a number of areas we looked at within the department itself. We literally take the department apart and then we put it back together and we identify where any shortcomings are, and then we make our recommendations how you can reduce these risks or shortcomings. So we look at the governance of the department, administration, facilities, training, service levels, responses, dispatch, communication systems, fire prevention, public ed, emergency planning, protection, automatic and mutual aid agreements, and financial implications such as the budgets themselves and capital planning for future. Next one, please. So the process itself is quite a bit of research and meetings take place, and we do a lot of information gathering. Then we analyze that data that we've gathered, and then we have discussions with the stakeholders through the whole process and consulting with them, and then we draft our recommendations and discussions, and the final document is put together. So it's a flow of ongoing process in which we follow to make up the fire master plan itself. Next one, please. So the standards are used that we referenced during the development of your fire master plan, and that's the OFM's guidelines, Fire Prevention Protection or Protection Prevention Act, sorry, NFPA, the Commissioners of Accreditation, which is Fire Department Accreditation International, Fire Underwriter Survey, and that affects your insurance ratings for the community. They set the grading for which the insurance companies set their rates for insurance. And the activity of the fire department greatly affects your Fire Underwriter Survey gradings. Municipal standards regulation, council-approved policies within it, Ministry of Labor, Section 21 committee guidance notes, and then industry best practices. So how we look at these different standards is that's the baseline the fire department needs to meet. So if you meet them and you meet the benchmark, that's great. If you're above it, that's even better. You want to maintain that. But if you're below the benchmark, there's work to be done. So if an incident were to occur, an investigation occurred, they would bring out these standards and say, are you meeting these benchmarks? And then they would make their investigation recommendations based on that. If you're below the benchmark, that's when it becomes a lot of pressures are placed on the municipality and the fire department to bring their standards up to where they should be. Next slide, please. So the recommendations, there are 46 of them. They're based on either operational or strategic. Operational being that staff can look after them, minimal cost to the corporation, or strategic ones which have financial implications which need council approval. And primarily the ones we'll speak on tonight is administration, the fire station staffing, and apparatus. Next slide, please. So for administration, we've already discussed the CRA having been completed. Now the community risk reduction plan needs to be developed based on the CRA and the fire master plan itself. We recommended a full-time administrative assistant to assist with daily workload. We found that the fire chief spends a lot of time during his day spent on paperwork and doing administrative duties. There is a need for a full-time deputy fire chief that could also be your fire prevention officer, public life safety educator. So they're dual purpose position. We found that the lack of upper senior management, if the chief was away, could be problematic and place extra workload on the district chiefs of the two stations. We also recommended reviewing current SOGs, standard operating guidelines, and develop new ones. We thought that there was a need for some improvements there. Next slide, please. For fire prevention, the department is not meeting fire underwriter survey or NFPA 1730 recommended frequency of inspections. You have a contract right now with Middlesex Center to assist with fire prevention inspections. We recommend that this be reviewed and possibly terminated. With the hiring of the full-time deputy fire chief, we thought that the funds that are currently being set aside for Middlesex Center could be reassigned to the deputy chief role. And they could also look after the fire prevention needs of the department, plus the administration that assists the fire chief with that role as well. Next slide, please. There's quite an effect in the training under the NFPA certifications in all ranks. It's very costly and it takes time to complete them. If I'm not mistaken, 2026 is the deadline for everybody to be certified in the NFPA standards, 1001 level 1 and 2. There's a need for a training facility or a partnership with a neighboring fire service for a training facility. Fire chief needs to establish a training records management system that's compatible with the requirements under NFPA 1401. And the fire department needs to initiate a pre-incident plan program that complies with NFPA 1620. Presently, you do not have any pre-incident plans. Next slide, please. Under suppression, we thought it was important that you standardize the fleet and the equipment throughout the department. There's many advantages to doing so. It's standardizing the fleet reduces the amount of training time and the cost of the equipment. No matter which truck they're on, the firefighters are familiar with the pump, the compartments, the chassis itself, and how to drive it. So they'd be able to jump in any one of the trucks, provided it's the same chassis, and drive it. There's a need for an audit of the radio system and upgrade from analog to digital platforms. Transport Canada is asking, or Communications Canada is asking for departments to leave the analog platform and move to digital platform because there's not enough frequencies available. So they're asking departments to start moving up, and in fact, they're pressuring departments to employ this sooner than later. There's a need for increased funding for the reserve accounts for the station upgrades and replacement. There's a need for a purchase of a used elevating device. We recommended a 75-foot device under the FUS related recommendation. And the stations require an exhaust extraction system, which is part of your cancer prevention program. Next slide, please. Budget and finance, what are the implications going to be on next generation 911? Even though the county of Middlesex is responsible for it, the cost of this implementation will be passed on to the municipalities through your assessments. The financial impact from the provincial certifications of the firefighters and the officers, that will have a financial impact. enhancements to the number of full-time staff, such as the administrative assistant and the deputy fire chief. There's a need to review the development charges and fees charges bylaws, specifically to the schedule relating to the fire protection. And the capital budget needs to include a set amount each year to go towards cost of apparatus and ancillary equipment to outfit it. The cost of fire trucks now has gone exponentially quite high since the pandemic. For a custom pumper now, it's used to be just under $1 million. Now it's about $1.2 to $1.3 million for a custom pumper. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we appreciated all the assistance coming from the North Middlesex Fire Department and its members. We want to thank them for their cooperation and development of this fire master plan. Now, in a number of areas within the fire master plan, you'll see that we speak to staff time as to the cost. Well, that's provided the staff have time to work on that recommendation, aside from their normal administrative duties. So that could have an indication of how quick some of them can be implemented based on time availability. Next slide, please. So thank you very much again, and I'm available to take any questions if you may have any.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there is some questions out here. So it's a very extensive question. Who wants to start? Councillor Nerda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just some clarification. I need some clarification on you recommended adding a full-time administrative assistant. What does this look like? Do you have a sample job description? I'm just confused on what he or she would be doing.
They would be responsible for assisting with training records, fire prevention, inspection forms, and cataloging, record management system, looking after the development of all your records. They would also assist with your asset management program, such as all the equipment within the fire department needs to be documented and their record history of repairs and when it needs to be replaced. Invoicing under the fees bylaw to MTO, plus also the community themselves. They could also look after the firefighters' pay allotments as well, and recording the fire calls themselves and submitting the fire calls to the fire marshal's office on a monthly basis. Just as an example.
Okay, follow up.
Just to follow up, and maybe this is for Chief. Who does all this now?
Through the mayor. A lot of this is done by myself. Some of it is done by our admin assistant. Some of it is done by the 2 district chiefs, and some of it is done by the training chief. It's kind of spread out so that we can try and manage it as best we can.
Okay. Councillor Keel?
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Rick, I have a question here for you. First and foremost, this fire underwriter survey, are they a governing body or legislative body, or are they just by opinion only that they like to put stuff on print?
They set the insurance rates or grading, I'm sorry, for dwellings and commercial properties across Canada. And what it is, the municipality or the fire department has fire underwriters survey, complete a survey of the fire department and the community. Based on what the fire department provides, the equipment, the stations, number of firefighters, plus the water system in the community, there's a number of factors they will look at. And then once they complete their evaluation, they then set the grading for the community, for the buildings in the community itself. Then the insurance companies use those gradings to set the insurance rates. Now, when communities have their tanker shuttle accreditation, if a residence is within 5 miles of a water source, they get a reduction on their, 5 kilometers, they get a reduction on their insurance rates. How much that is based on whatever the grading is for that building itself and what the insurance rates are themselves. So I can't tell you how much money they would save because it depends on what their occupancy is, what they're insuring. But they are an important entry in setting the insurance rates across your community. Not all insurance companies use their grading system. Some of them have their own grading, but a very vast majority of insurance companies use fire underwriters grading system to set their insurance premiums.
Yeah, I find that interesting because you're using it on property only, but I'm looking here as I'm reading through the North Middlesex Fire Master Plan here today. And it indicates here that many pieces of equipment have a predetermined lifespan is established in the NFPA, the FUS, ULC, and CSA standards, or in the Ontario Health and Safety Section 21 guideline notes. When equipment ends its lifespan, the item is replaced and the old ones are disposed of to ensure outside interests cannot repurpose them for liability reasons. However, when I move to page 191, it's your recommendation that we buy a used truck. Are they not already decommissioned? So where's the benefit of buying a used truck if everybody has done with their due diligence? They've disposed of one that has been decommissioned. It's kind of contradictory there.
Sorry to interrupt, sir.
That's great.
What we're finding is a lot of fire departments in the United States lease their apparatus. In Canada, we keep our trucks for 20 to 30 years. Down in the United States, when they're leased, they're returned within 10 years. They've still got another 10 to 15 years of life left in them, and they can be purchased at a fraction of the cost. As long as they meet the fire underwriters requirements and the safety and the NFPA standards, they are fine to use. But once they hit that milestone of 20 or 25 years, fire underwriters then reduce the credit they will allow for that apparatus due to its age. But if you're able to pick up a truck that's used and quite a time before the 20-year timeline, then there's a savings to the municipality. But when you're using, and I'll use an example, say fire hose, and the hose starts leaking, it's best to totally destroy it rather than let somebody else have it. Then they pressurize it and say it lets go, and then they come back on the liability on the municipality. So that's why we're recommending that equipment be disposed of.
So that kind of brings me to another point. If these trucks and equipment are available from the US, we really wouldn't know what their service of life has been. Oftentimes we're getting rid of trucks at 25 years old or 20 years old with less than 40,000 kilometers on them, when in fact we could be purchasing an aerial truck that has 60, 80, or 100,000 miles on them if they're out of the US that would meet our financial threshold here. So I guess what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around buying something out of the US when there could be something available here, or do we even need one at all?
Well, you raise a good point on a couple of areas there. First off, in Canada, very few fire departments, in fact, I don't know of any that lease their apparatus. So most trucks, when they hit that cusp of 20 to 25 years, especially an aerial device, which comes from a professional department, it's usually in the end of life and in poor condition. So you may get use of it for a few years, but you still got a very significant investment. The reason we suggest they come out of the States is through the leasing program. They're 10 years old. You would need to do your due diligence in asking for all the maintenance records of it, possibly hiring a third party to go down and inspect the truck that's got a emergency vehicle technician certification, that they could go down and examine the vehicle before you commit to purchasing. Not to mention, you would send your own officers down as well to inspect it. But it'd be very well worth your opportunity to hire a third party to assist in evaluating the truck before you make such an investment and bring it back to Canada. But also, having said that, you also have to consider that once it comes across the border, you will need to convert the couplings to CSA or NFPH for the meet the Ontario requirements, but also needed safety inspections as well. That's required up in Canada. So again, that's part of the inspection down there. You'd be able to see what would be required to safety it in Canada, and you could judge roughly what that cost would incorporate as well, not to mention the transportation of the truck coming to Canada.
Okay, then I have another question, and this one will be for Greg. Exhaust ventilation systems indicates stations. Did we not put an exhaust system in this brand spanking new fire hall?
So there is what what Rick and Emergency Management Group are suggesting, recommending are the hoses that connect right to the exhaust, and then they capture that and exhaust it. We didn't see that in any of the stations that we toured. I've certainly seen those in full-time stations where you have living quarters and understand the need for it there. With the ventilation system that we installed with the vents and the fans, I think that we're doing the best we can. We got the best value for that. When we do the next station, maybe that's something that we need to look at and can access funds for cancer prevention grants. But with the amount of time we spend in the station now, I'm happy with what we have.
Councillor Daigle.
To go back on the used truck item, we've been passing back and forth a new pumper situation for us. And we have, like, to my knowledge, at Used American, but by the time we convert it, we're within dollars of buying it a new one, within dollars. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. By the time we can do the conversion, everything else, and or it be now tariffs, we just may not. We might be in the hole for going with a used machine.
All right, I think that's more just comments, right? Okay, Deputy Mayor Hodgins, we'll give everybody a chance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the comments here probably directed to Craig. Where do our fire inspections occur? Are they coming from Middlesex Center? I thought we did, like, I thought Deputy Chief, if I got it right, Mr. Densmore was doing some of them.
No, they are all done through contract, via contract with Middlesex Center.
Do we know I'm sure we know what the cost is that for having them come in to do it? For 2024, we had budgeted $30,000 and we came in just below that. To do those inspections, yes. Which was one of the comments, it was mentioned here in the where we're talking about, but that could be something that I'm just looking at a deputy chief, full-time deputy chief doing. I'm just looking at the cost and everything else.
Yes, somebody who can do fire inspections and a dual role, whether it's deputy chief / fire prevention officer or training officer / fire prevention. There's some options there. There's a combination of things one person could do. Yes. I'm gonna leave it at that for now while I think about this.
Just to follow up to that before I come to you, can somebody tell me what do we pay Middlesex Center for the inspections?
It was just under $30,000 last
Under
year.
30, sorry, I missed it.
Yeah.
I missed the number. Thank you. Go ahead. Councillor Canellis.
Thank you. My question is for whoever chooses to answer. It could be from Greg or Scott or Rick over here. Middlesex Center is a larger fire service than we have. They have 5 stations. We only have 2. How many full-time staff do they have? Anyone?
Yes, I think Deputy Chief Jones is correct. I think it's 4. There's a chief, a deputy chief, fire prevention, and an admin assistant.
Okay, very well. My next question is for Rick, I believe, and I was reading this. This is a difficult read, by the way. 500 pages I thought was a little excessive, and I was hoping that it could be a little bit more condensed. However, I did struggle through it. Could you tell me how you identified the comparables? When I looked at your comparables for our community, I thought you were out to lunch. Like, how did you identify them?
First off, we try to get a comparison across Southern Ontario of different communities. So you get a good variance of what other departments are going through and for their comparables. Whereas of the local comparables, say of other departments within Middlesex County, you already have that information. The chief can access that quite easily by contacting the other fire chiefs in the communities, or you could contact some of your counselors in the other communities as well and ask questions in the immediate area. We wanted to get a broad spectrum of information across different communities so you have a good comparison of what you can compare your department to other departments and see what's going on throughout Ontario.
Well, thank you very much. Now, just a brief answer, if you don't mind. But most of these comparables, as I read it anyway, the population was significantly more than ours. Some of them are up at 20,000, we're at 6,000. How do you justify that?
Again, we looked at many parts of the comparable, such as population, number of calls, wages,
thank you.
that sort of thing, and that's what we wanted to include.
Thank you very much. Now, in terms of your recommendations, what's the total cost of your recommendations?
That I do not have off the top of my head right
Well,
now.
would you not think there's something you'd want to bring to us so that we know what it is?
Not the total cost, because you would set a priority as to what you would want to expenditure first, but we did give an approximate cost within the fire master plan.
Yes,
For
and that's what I'm alluding
each
to.
item itself. But
And that's what I'm
depending
alluding
on-
to. That's what
Yes.
I'm referring to. You came up with a cost analysis, but you don't submit a total, so I thought I'd ask you, what is the total?
We don't normally give a total because council sets the priority as to what they would like to look after first in consultation with the fire chief.
Okay, thank you. My final comment is that I do have a call into the fire underwriter survey because I want to have more in-depth understanding of what exactly they do and what is actually required from them. Thank you.
Councillor Irwin.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I want to clarify, the motion in front of us tonight is to accept the reports for information. That's right. Okay. And then future actions in terms of actualizing any HR or financial will come through the normal channels, budget, et cetera. Thank you. Now, my question then is, except if accepted for information, what would be your next steps?
Once accepted, or however we proceed with it, I will create those action items that are short term. There's some of them that we are already working on. We probably had them in the works as we went into this. The review and updating of our SOGs, trying to get a better handle on the training, those kind of things. Of course, anything else that has a budgetary impact is going to have to go through our budget committee, fire committee. You know, there's some things there that I see that are very, very long term, and I'm not looking at those in the short term. So,
Okay, Councillor Irwin, follow up.
I think that answered my question, Your Worship, but I just want to clarify. So any additional actions would be vetted through the fire committee before coming forward to council?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is there any other questions now? We've all had a chance, but Deputy Mayor Hodgins, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple things. Was there any consideration taken to, say, the new updated building codes that buildings are required to have now? And I'm maybe not so much at residentials, but 4-story apartments that possibly an aerial won't, well, you would possibly need an aerial to reach, but they're getting away with it because new standards allows more fire retardant, more access to water to the top of their buildings to put things out. Is that given any consideration as to any of the helping out the recommendations that we're looking forward to? If you follow my question.
I believe I do. The Ontario Building Code was changed that up to 6 stories can be made out of ordinary construction materials such as your wood, not necessarily block and concrete. Anything above 5 stories has to be sprinklered now under the Ontario Building Code. So there is some changes in the building code that require some fire suppression devices be put in place once it gets to 5 stories and above. But up to 6 stories, they can build those structures out of wood. So that we have to take into consideration, yes. An aerial device is not always used for high-rise fires themselves. They're also be very valuable at farm fires, barn fires, that sort of thing. Any other fires where they need a water stream coming from above, down, even large homes, some of the farmhouses that are, 2.5, 3 stories high. You don't have a ladder that'll reach the roof for the firefighters to ventilate it. If you had an aerial device, they would be able to reach the roof and be able to do ventilation safely. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do ventilation itself or even fight the fire.
Okay. Councillor Daigle, you want to follow up?
Just one more item. If we accept this for information purposes only tonight, it doesn't bind us to any of these recommendations. That's, just want that set up
Yeah.
loud.
Yeah, that's why tonight is just for information. So, because this is an ongoing process, I think, and there's a lot of impact here, financial impact, plus department impact, and how things are done. So I think that's a very important point. Another
Your
question,
worship?
Councilor Keel.
Your worship, may I add something?
Yes,
To the point on the recommendations, that's exactly what they are. They're recommendations. They're not mandated
Right.
by any means. Council will sets this level of service. So if I could clarify that to help the council at all.
okay, thank you. Councilor Keel.
Yeah, Mayor Rob, just one more question. Initially, we had the fire master plan given to us all back first week of December, before Christmas anyhow. Then we were told, don't read that. There's going to be an amended one. Are we paying for one fire master plan? Or are we paying for two? Anybody?
Updates are standard. That's not a
Oh.
problem with us. We normally do that quite often for municipalities because new information comes forward once we do the initial draft. Something will come forward, we make those changes. Normally, there's no extra cost.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Listen, I want to thank you very much for your time here and for the effort spent by our fire department and yourselves. Thank you very much for this information.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, we have a recommended motion anything you want to add to this? Sorry. Okay, we have a recommendation to accept this for information this time. Moved by Councilor Nelson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hodgins. In favor? Carried. Thank you. All right, our next one is a report for Director of Infrastructure on a roads needs study.
Through your worship, this report is coming from Sam and myself. So this report is the road needs study to be awarded to BMM Ross Associations. Submitted price of 64,940 excluding HST, and to have them do our Ontario Structure Inspection Manual OSIMs. That is required to be done this year and be awarded to them to BMS Ross Associations. Sam and I are available for any questions.
Questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Nelson.
Brandon, I don't know if you know the answer to this, and I'm comfortable with just a guess, but how many bridges and culverts do we actually have that would need inspecting?
Go ahead.
Oh, Sam, sorry.
Through your worship to the councillor, it's mandated anything over 3 meters in span length. So what we've historically been doing is roughly about 60 structures, 30 bridges and roughly 30 culverts. Yep.
Okay, so and then Brandon or Sam, doesn't matter. So the steel structure on Mooresville Drive that crosses the Asalba River, is that one that would be inspected? Okay, thank you.
Councilor Daigle?
Just noting here, BM Ross is the 64.9 is for the road needs. But the 26.5, is that replacing what we'd pay in the past streets for the bridge inspection?
Go ahead, Sam.
Through your worship to the councillor, historically, another consulting firm has done the OSIM work for us. What we've found is we're not getting the information or budget stuff we need from those. So through BM Ross, there is certainly efficiencies in them driving all of our roads anyway. For the road needs study, we thought that they do the bridge work at the same time. The cost up front is going to be more expensive, which is why it is the way it is now, because this is the first time they'll do them for us. Obviously, every time after that, they would be cheaper because they would have already done the inventory for us once. So certainly it's roughly about 10,000 more than we would normally pay, though we are getting a lot more information from these than we are in the past ones that we need. And again, next time we have to do them, it would be cheaper.
Okay. Councilor Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Sam, when BM Ross takes on this task, are they going to prioritize this kind of work for us? I know last time we would just get a binder with pictures of all of our bridges and culverts, but nothing, it was just a 1 to 5 year type thing. With this, are we getting something that's a priority and
go ahead, Sam.
clearly listed?
So through your worship, That's certainly why Brandon and I have put this recommendation forward. I have the same thoughts as you. In working on the budget, it's difficult to pull anything out when it all has the exact same timelines with no priority to it. BM Ross has done the work for me in the past, and that's how they do it, is priority by year and cost. So that's certainly one of the things we're looking for from BM Ross. Yes.
All right. Other questions? No other questions? We have a recommendation in front of you. Moved by Counselor Daigle, correct? Seconded by Counselor Irwin. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And our next one is the report once again. Alan, I believe this is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Having being directed, staff being directed to award this roads need study, the clerk would like to establish some boundaries of council participation moving forward with this. The recommendation is a consultation group that is less than quorum of council with no voting powers. By going with the consultation group, we reduce bureaucracy through having less bylaws, paperwork, records retention, staff time, and so on. We also keep the intent of the study on track in that we want to find objective facts and observations in an organic way instead of providing what we want to hear and working backwards from that. So basically, what's being proposed is a consultation group that's going to participate in 3 to 4 staff meetings, including the kickoff meeting, to provide some historical background, but not necessarily inject what we're going to do here, because this is a scientific study. So with that, the staff recommendation is that council accepts the report as information, and that Brian Ropp, Adrian Cornelison, John Keogh be authorized to attend consultation sessions for the roads need study.
Okay, questions on that? No questions? Oh, Counselor Nerda? Oh, you're making a motion? Moved by Counselor Nerda, seconded by Counselor Irwin. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Office closures is yours as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. The office closure proposal for this year is Christmas to the end of New Year's. The office will be closed, and then any other statutory holidays. And the recommendation on the table is to accept a report for information, and that the 2025 statutory holidays, negotiated closures, and additional closures requested between Christmas and New Year's be approved.
Any questions? We have a recommendation in front of us. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hodgins, seconded by Counselor Daigle, sorry. All in favor? Carried. All right, next committee reports. I'll just go through them quick. Lake Huron Primary. Okay, ABCA. Okay, Blue Water Recycling. Economic Development.
We had an excellent meeting, Your Worship, last week. Sad to say that our chair has now left us. And there is a new chair appointed to the committee, which is myself. Hopefully there'll be a report coming forward at the next or the following council meeting. And a number of new members have been added to the committee, given the new bylaw and some resignations.
Okay, thank you. Did the past chair give any reason for leaving, or did she just? Okay.
I believe it's a combination of personal and professional priorities. Your Worship.
Okay. Local School Advisory. Nothing? Rec Committee? Policy Review Committee? Nothing there right now. Fire Committee?
Yes, we have some things. The one comment I would like to make to start off is that I just looked at the attachments to the fire committee, and they're for the Sauba Bayfield Conservation Authority, so I won't be speaking to that. But I do believe that Councillor Daigle has something, but I will invite him to do that later. I'd ask the chief to come forward if he would, and to share with us some of our discussions from last night, since you're much more familiar with it than I am.
Okay. Go ahead, Chief. Go ahead. You start.
Thank you. I didn't bring any notes, but thank you. I At fire committee last night, we discussed a few things that will be coming forward, mostly in budget committee discussions. Some ideas for fire prevention and safety messaging, some costs associated with that. Some ideas for enhancing our recruitment and retention initiatives, some of which may be discussed in the fire master plan, but certainly things that we've become aware of through talking with other departments. And there will be an item in the budget, a new line for wellness for our firefighters to support their mental health in what we're doing.
Did you want to talk about the compensation thing that we're going to be looking at? With your firefighters, you're going to get them together to talk about it?
Oh, yes, yes. So we did talk about, I was kind of in the discussion there. We have talked to our neighboring departments about their pay structures. And across Middlesex County, the 8 departments, not including London, nobody is paying their firefighters in the same way. There's different point systems, different value for points. And so what I would like to do is do something so that to restructure our pay. Won't change the bottom line, but to raise the level of the hourly pay, which ours is the lowest of the ones that I've surveyed, which were kind of our comparables. Lucan, Adelaide Metcalfe, and Southwest Middlesex. We are the lowest rate of hourly pay, and be able to bring that up and bring down the value of a point, which is what we award when we go to a call. So I'll be trying to get a committee together of firefighters working on restructuring that, and then we will be bringing that through fire committee to the policy committee, but emphasizing that it's not changing the bottom line of what they're being paid. It's just how they are earning that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Councilor Daigle, did you want to make your motion now or your recommendation?
Thank you. In our conversations on fire prevention and awareness, emergency awareness, there is a picture available, is there not? Was brought up to us, the use of the Zamboni as a method of getting communications out to people. And the thought last night that I put forward for it was that one side be like that, the other side could look like an ambulance. And you have a spot there to put messaging on so people see it. Right now our Zamboni is going around naked. So we should cover it up, but whoops, I've lost it this second. So the motion was here to ask council that or to create a line in the line item in the budget for the wrapping of the Zamboni with an approximate cost of $3,500.
Are you making that a motion, Councilor Daigle?
I will do that.
I will second it.
Is there discussion on that before we vote? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I'd maybe just like to ask Brandon, historically, have we not had any advertising on our ice resurfacing equipment?
So through the mayor to the councillor, historically we have, up until this new unit, we used to have different companies. I think we had 4 or 5 on there with individual logos, which we would receive revenue about $400 a pop. So probably close to $2,000 a year. With the new one, when it came through, COVID was there. When we came out of COVID, I discussed the opportunity to wrap the machine and try and source somebody who would like to advertise that, as it is in most municipalities, a prime revenue generator for them in advertising. We went out for tender. We were unsuccessful in getting anyone on the tender side of it. When Future Signs came in, I kind of mentioned that option if they would know anyone who would be interested in doing that, what our price point would be. certainly the advertisement route on it can be explored again, in my opinion, prior to maybe going this route where we don't see any revenue, or possibly a shared service where it's somebody's sponsoring the fire side of it, somebody's sponsoring the ambulance side. As you can see in that photo that Felicia shared, the top is bare, so maybe somebody's logo goes on that to help sponsor the awareness piece. But certainly I think that it's an opportunity for us to explore, and I can bring a further report on options to do that if council would like.
Okay, I just want to be clear. I'm not trying to deter the motion that's being brought forward. I just,
Getting information.
well, it must be the only unlabeled Zamboni in the area.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
And this is not approving it in the budget. This is to create a line item to go in the budget to discuss. All right. Any other discussion on it? In favor? Carried. One other point to that I would like to say is we did talk also about, we have two really good light up signs in Park Hill, Elsa Craig, plus the scoreboard that's now at the arena that can have labeling in there. And don't say McLeod. Anyways, but those are to our disposal as well, so. Okay, Budget Committee. Ralph, you mentioned something to me during the break there. Do you want to speak to council at that?
All I was saying, thank you, Mayor, is that I'm working on the 2025 budget and finding that my approach to it is vastly different from my predecessors. So I intend to invite council to an information session to walk you through how I'm doing my math, so that when we finally get to budget deliberations, you're understanding where the numbers came from and can understand why all of a sudden you're seeing FTEs and things of that nature that you haven't seen in the past.
And I think it might work out well to do much like today, have an education session before council at a future meeting. So, okay, thank you. Community Development Fund. I think we do have something coming up afterwards. Councillor Irwin?
Yes, Your Worship. Just in association with the fund, I was at a meeting of the Elsa Craig Village Association last night, and there's representatives there from the car show, Highland Games and Arts Center, all very appreciative of the work of the committee this year and the approval by council, waiting for their official letters, but did see the motion from our previous council meeting and would like to pass their thanks on to council.
Okay, thank you. Middlesex County OPP Board, anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended one of them and I apologize for not making this afternoon's meeting here. It seemed like it was more fun over in Elderton. No, I asked Alan to put an attachment on for the minutes and the agenda and Middlesex County's stats for the last year of 24. So if there's any questions on that, you can get back to me and I'll try to answer it. One thing I did ask, I think it was just kind of mentioned to me by our mayor. Number one, it brought up about presence, seeing in the play, and I asked him, like if you get the stats on, I'm not saying when you're making a call, but how often do you just do a drive through Elsa Craig, Park Hill, or out in the country? And he says, Cam got it with me, but I says, I can get it for you. And I thought, well, I'm hoping he will be invited to a meeting again this year. And he said, remind me ahead of time and I will look up that kind of information to present it the night he comes. So I'll look after that if I know the night that he's coming. A lot of things discussed today. Won't go over a lot of with to do with calls and stuff. The administrative assistant or person that did the work for us, the minutes for us and the recording of the meeting for us. His last day is Friday. So the little discussion as to who will do that coming up in the future. Long discussion on that, but as it is left now, John Brennan from Middlesex Center is the chairman. Sue Clark is the deputy, and between they've agreed and said they have, and I mean, because Morgan, and I can't think of the guy from it. There's about four, there was minutes, four people from there for our clerks and everything, and CEO was there.
Okay.
And it's been agreed, and they discussed we can handle it. It was possibly looked at being taken over by the county, but it was voted on that it would stay in the hands of the group there, which I believe it should. But other than that, until for the next, I will say there's 3 more meetings this year and 4 next year. Maybe it'll all be changed in the next election year. So
Okay.
time we're holding status quo.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing it getting moving and getting it
Well,
going forward.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm sure you do too.
good. Thank you. If there's any questions?
Any questions at this time? Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Correspondence, Community Development Fund. Brandon, is that you? Okay.
So Mayor Ott, members of council, as you may recall at the last meeting, when we delivered the Community Development Fund, we also included that organizations who were declined funding may submit additional information. We did have an organization already submit a letter, which is St. Andrews for their beef dinner. The letter's been attached to the agenda as well as winter events that they are hosting this year. During their application, they did kind of cite generic reasons for wanting the funding. So through this letter, they've kind of indicated what they're actually going to need the funding for to help support the different programs that they operate. And then I'll just pull it up here. So they do have quite a few different things, as well as March break camps, summer camps, some swims for youth, pizza and games after church, which is directed at youth. So what they are looking for is our support. So I am going to recommend that we do look at waiving their rental fee for this specific rental, given the new information they have, but I leave it to council to decide. Thank you.
All right. Questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Nelson.
I read the letter a number of times. I keep getting stuck on the part where they say, yes, the funding received is to do some maintenance for the structure itself. I have no issue with supporting children's programs at all. I think that's a very valuable contribution that we can make. However, I still believe that the congregation is responsible for maintaining the church itself. Other than that, those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
I agree.
Okay, okay. We have a recommendation in front of us this time. Go ahead, Al.
Your worship, before we take our next step here, I want to caution the group that this would be a reconsider resolution.
Yep.
So any decision made now would be permanent on this issue.
On this issue, yeah. Not permanent that every year we're giving them a check. Yeah. but it's- Okay, so everybody's,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brandon, can you just refresh my memory? What rentals are they asking for?
So through the mayor to the councillor, this is for their annual beef dinner that they host in Elsa Craig, as well as a pavilion rental that I believe they do a family type outing at. So their fundraiser supporting their activities, as well as, I guess, their general coffers, which probably supports maintenance, but primarily some of the other things. And then, yeah, it's just their dinner. So it would be on our books, it would just come through as a zero. They would be given a $0 rental. And that's the effect.
And just for further clarification, it's the pavilion in Narren.
Correct.
Thanks.
So the total value of the 2 rentals is about $793 to us.
Councilor Daigle.
So it's just in facility rental. There's no dollars going to them.
Correct. They will not be issued a check. They will be issued a free rental.
Okay. All right, we have a recommendation in front of you. What's your wish? Moved by Councilor Irwin, second by Deputy Mayor Hodgins. In favor? Opposed? 1 opposed. It's carried. 7.2 is more correspondence, and that is AMO tariffs and trade. I think it's a great time to remind North Middlesex, our staff, and to shop with Canadian products as much as possible. And I want to commend at the fire meeting last night, they were talking about pricing Canadian made trucks, and and boots and different things that they're working on. I know it's not always possible, but when we can, it's just a great time to encourage that.
I'm reading this and are they asking us to support this by motion?
They are asking for support on it, which that's the AMO tariffs and trade.
It just, I found the wording a little challenging, but I will move it.
You're moving that?
Yep.
Okay, is there a seconder? Yeah, you're gonna second it? Seconded by Councilor Collins. In favor? Carried. Fort Erie Provincial Election Healthcare Advocacy. Receive and file. Barn Quilt Committee closure and a request for directed fund towards West Williams Community Hall, Ken Vernon Park, and you're gonna speak on it, Brandon? Okay, go ahead.
So Mayor Ropp, members of council, as some of you may recall, we used to have a barn quilting group who operated out of our West Williams Hall. They have just recently closed their committee off and are closing out their accounts. In doing this, they have a motion to issue a check to the municipality as a donation of $5,300 or $5,361.64. Their hope is that that can be put forth into a fund for the improvement of West Williams Community Hall and Ken Vernon Park. Just minor upgrades, things like that. That's where they called home for about 10 years, and that's where they would like their money to go. So in order to do this, we would need council to approve a bylaw to basically earmark a fund for that. So.
Okay, questions? Councilor Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Up. Brendan, the event that they held there last year, they had a number of RVs there as well. Did that bring any specific challenges to the organization?
So through the mayor to the councillor, what we did notice is that there was some requests for additional hydro usage. I will be carrying a line item to budget committee for some hydro upgrades. In speaking with the Mud Creek group, they would like to give funds back to the municipality that they charge for hydro and that they charge for early camping, and then have those funds go in so that they can try and pay back those upgrades. Certainly these funds here, the 5,300 being earmarked for that, could be used towards that as well, which would then take implication off our budget.
You answered it specifically as I was hoping you would. So that at least my next question, does that mean that other individuals can bring their RVs there as well?
So through the mayor to the councillor, yes. Our hope is that we have other events that happen in this community, and if there are people looking for spots that are running those events, that they can camp there. We do have a dog show on the books for 2026, which is supposed to be a national level dog show at West Williams, that are asking about trailers already. Seeing Mud Creek do it successfully kind of gives me hope that we'll start to see more and more spin off of events like this, where you can have multiple trailers as well as an event on the grounds.
So if someone were to have like a family reunion that has a very large family, that would also be considered?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Daigle?
Just to clarify, it's not going to be a campground.
Correct. It would be set up as there's an event there. You can access this hydro through your contract, but there would be a charge for that. So yeah, anything beyond that would be a council discussion in future.
Yeah, and we did talk this afternoon a little bit. The point is not to be competitor to the camp, to the hideaway and stuff. That's not the purpose of this. Any other questions on this? What's council's wish? We have a recommendation. Moved by Councillor Knellison, seconded by Councillor Nerda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the other one is the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, support Canada and Ontario in negotiations with trade tariffs. You're moving to support that. Councillor Irwin, seconder is Councillor Daigle. All in favor? Carried. Other and urgent business? Seeing none? Deferred items, communications, including county council. Any questions there? Seeing none, reading of the bylaws. Alan, you got to read them all out, right? Sorry, Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. This one would be for our fire chief. I'm just while I was going through this afternoon, under the fees and charges table, when I got to page 13, in our fees and charges,
Okay.
looking under Schedule 1 Fire Department. There's no rate, there's a couple of rates there, one for standard incident and investigation report, property file search. Everything else is current MTO published rate, which is what?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. It got revised in November or 1st of December, and I think it's about $586 an hour for the first hour per truck. And then every half hour afterwards, it's half of that.
Well, seemingly in previous council, when I was on fire with you, I think we were about $1,100 a truck, were we not?
No, it's always been MTO rate. We were just updating that document every year with what the MTO rate was, and we found it more efficient to just put current MTO rate.
I was gonna say, we used to put a number on it, but then we'd get out of date right away.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because we would have that lag, right? It gets updated in November. We don't do this until February. We've got 3 months of not charging that updated rate.
You have-
Your worship.
Okay, go ahead.
It's $559.86 per apparatus for the first hour and $279.93 for each additional 30 minutes.
Okay, no, if that was posted, I wouldn't have the question.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Nelson, did you have a question on the bylaws? Okay, okay.
I know this is your question. I won't record it for it. But I was specifically looking at those, bush.
Can you clarify what you mean by a bush chalet? Well, how large, through the, how large would these be? How large would these be?
Well, some of them are pretty elaborate. But I don't know.
Go ahead, Sam. Do you have an answer for that at all?
Through your worship to the counselor, any inspections to do with building or plumbing is all through Middlesex Center, including permits.
And what about fire inspections?
I'm not aware of any of them ever having been inspected. They are done, as was mentioned earlier, it is usually through complaints that those are being brought to our attention. That's other than the required inspections of our vulnerable occupancies and that thing, type of thing. If those are the kind of deficiencies that we are not addressing.
I would assume that on some weekends, there might be some vulnerable people back there, given how they may indulge.
Okay.
May I
Go
just
ahead.
mention that a structure can be built without a fire or building inspection that is under, is 15 square meters in size or smaller. So I'm sure any counselor's building must be smaller than that as well.
I would just add to that it is on complaint driven. And I only remember in my time here, one time where we've had a complaint on shacks in the bush. And it was dealt with at that time on an individual basis. But that's the only, is there any other questions here on the bylaws? See none, go ahead, Alan.
Okay. Your worship, just a clarification to the group. After looking at the schedules, I do see 1 or 2 typos, not regarding the numbers, but just in the words. I'm going to correct that, but considering that clerical in nature. And for the bylaws, I'm going to break with tradition and say that bylaws 13 through 25 of 2025 be approved first and second time.
Not gonna read them? No. Moved by Councillor Daigle, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hodgins. All in favor? And third and final, Councillor Nerda, Councillor Irwin, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we have no closed meeting. So I have a move to adjourn. Oh, sorry. Ralph, go ahead. So you want it to be 26 to the 26?
Yeah, the fees and charges bylaw and the confirming bylaw have the same number.
See, that's why it's always better when you read them out.
Yeah. It's an open disclosure. I was just getting this agenda in under the line on the weekend. I got it in at 4:29 and the cutoff's 4:30 for that. So
No, no problem. All right. Move to adjourn. Counselor Nerda. Counselor Keo. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.